right, and we're back for another episode of the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Pop Culture Cosmos. The Lakers Fast Break, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows, and if you can, please give us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, as well, if you can give a 5-star review to the awesome show that my guest here today does, Bleav, that's Bleav, in Wizards. I might be more believing now after what happened this week. But if you can go ahead and give his show an outstanding 5-star review, it is greatly appreciated as well. Plus, if you can like, subscribe, follow, share, or do whatever you can to support all these great shows that we do, it is greatly appreciated. Well, I'll tell you what, there was a little bit of action again in the NBA as we get closer and closer to the start of this truncated regular season. And in fact, earlier today, about a third of the games, or actually almost up to half of the games were announced as far as the schedule is concerned. So hopefully the guys on Sunday at Lakerholics.com and I will go ahead and just look into that to see which matches up best, and maybe they'll go ahead and announce more games down the road. But for right now, it was a busy week because not only was there a big trade, but there was 2 awesome extensions for you Los Angeles Lakers fans out there. So you have AD and LeBron for actually probably a little bit more than you expected. But here today to talk about those extensions and, of course, the huge trade for his team is a good man indeed. You got to check out, like I said before, Bleav. That's Bleav, Bleav, from the Bleav Network, Bleav in Wizards, with his great co-host, actually, the host, co-host, whatever. He is actually
we share duties.
You share duties? Okay, so fellow host. How about that? Fellow host, because I like to always call that. Fellow host, former NBA great Larry Hughes, a man who I knew could fill it up like very few others in his prime. You got to go ahead and hear him, and also my guest as well, every time out, wherever you get your podcasts, on the Bleav in Wizards show. It is Matt Modderno. And Matt, great to have you back. It's been way too long, and I truly thank you for coming back on the show today.
Yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to it. Finally, some interesting basketball news to talk about.
Absolutely, indeed. So I will go ahead for Lakers fans and delve into the extensions first, because there's a lot to say when it comes to the mano-a-mano trade that the Wizards did, and see how that fits, because it might be actually a good thing for her. We'll talk about that here in a sec, but I wanted to go ahead and reach out to you in regards to your thoughts and your insight from an outsider's perspective, per se, because I was saying before, I know I hear always Laker Tom and my friends at the Lakerholics.com, and they'll always see it a certain way with the rose-colored shades on, but I always had to get an outsider's perspective, a different fan's perspective, per se, on some of the major moves that the Lakers make. And the Lakers did get a commitment, an extension for LeBron for an extra 2 years, so we now have him for a full 3 years, and AD signed a 4-year, well, actually a 3-year plus 1, so that at least we will have them both for 3 years. LeBron surprisingly did not add a player option, because that would have cost him $1 million from what I'm understanding. And he's got to have every million he can get, I guess, apparently. But he
can't leave that on the table.
Yeah, he can't leave that on the table. But he did not want a player option in the 3rd year, which I was found surprising. But I wanted to hear your thoughts when it comes to these extensions. LeBron's is worth $85 million. AD is worth $190 million. Although this doesn't necessarily take them out 100% out of the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes, it's going to be a lot harder for the Lakers to go ahead and get that done. But at least, the very least, we have a championship duo for 3 more years.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, I think that's the thinking there, and Giannis would be a nice to have, but do you really need him at this point? I think if you can continue to surround those guys with solid vets and a couple young guys, that's probably enough. And if any franchise is poised to go, deeper into the luxury tax to be able to make a move for somebody like Giannis, I got to think the Lakers are one of the few teams that could, realistically pull something like that off.
Oh yeah, I would go heavy into the tax if Giannis went knocking on the door, or some other superstar came knocking on the door, because you never know with health issues, and LeBron is getting older. You never know at what point in time the cyborg that he is may start to get some squeaky joints or whatnot, and may actually falter just a little. I know, perish the thought, right? That could actually happen, but he is, I think, human. I'm not quite 100% sure, but Rafael Barlow from the NBA Draft Junkies, I think we know he's a cyborg, but we also think he might be human at some point.
At some point, it's got to catch up to him. I think I've been saying that for 5 or 6 years, though, so maybe it won't.
Well, Father Time is undefeated, but
that's exactly right.
Yeah, Father Time is undefeated, but in this case, it's going to be a long run before you catch up to him. How about that?
That's right. Yeah, they're going the full 10, 12 rounds there at the very least. The 2-year extension is interesting because the first thought I had was, okay, is his kid draft eligible by 2022? Because that's always been the sort of running rumor there, that he wants to stick around long enough for that. And I don't think that's the case. I think that assuming he could come out of high school, it would be 2023 draft at the earliest. So that was my first thought, though. Is that what we're holding on for at this point?
It's very unique that that's the case, because he has mentioned that his desire, and obviously, as a parent, I would love that opportunity as well. So I totally get where he's coming from. But that would be 2023, I think, where it stands right now with Bronny. And then you also have the situation where this just came out of the blue. We were not expecting it as Laker fans. We were expecting him just to go in free agency and then re-upping with the Lakers. I think that was the expectation. If they do similar, whether they win a championship or get to that, close to that level, that he was going to re-up, again. This just came out of the blue, and I was like, wow, okay, he's committing. He's going all in for the Lakers for the next 3 years, and I thought that was a nice surprise for Lakers fans.
There's some talk about could the cap actually go down given everything that's happened with COVID. So maybe you take the 2 solid years now, or for AD, the potential 4, and just lock yourself into a nice chunk of change. And if things go up, a couple years from now, great. But at least you've probably weathered the storm in terms of any potential fallout from all the loss of revenue, this upcoming year.
Yeah, that's a best way to say it as well. I agree with you on that. And then with AD, that was even a little bit more surprising because, the heavy thought process was him getting back into free agency as soon as he could, which would have been a 1+1, when, like you said, after the COVID fades, but people are starting to go back into the arenas, people are starting to fill the arenas and obviously pay money. So maybe in 2022, 2020, right there, 2023 maybe, you would just have that option. But yeah, this was a little bit longer commitment. Although, like you said, I think, 3 seasons, he'll have the choice to go ahead and actually get back out on the market. But it's a little bit longer than I think a lot of people were anticipating.
I assumed AD would do a similar length deal to LeBron and kind of lock himself in for, hey, as long as LeBron's guaranteed to be here, I'll be here, and then we'll keep reassessing. But I think if you win a championship in the first year, he's got that off his back, and he's pretty secure financially. So might as well stay in sunny California for as long as you can.
I guess if you can and get heavily compensated for it, you know what? Why not? Why not, indeed? Once again, I'm on with Matt Modderno. He is from the Bleav in Wizards podcast. You got to go ahead and check him and Larry Hughes out each and every time out when it comes to the Bleav in Wizards. And I have a feeling, I haven't checked here in the past few days. I actually was checking before the massive trade that they just did for the Washington Wizards. But I have a feeling there's a podcast there for you in regards to the upcoming trade that the upcoming conversation we're going to have in regards to the trade that just happened.
Just dropped last night.
Yeah, it just dropped. And that is John Wall for Russell Westbrook. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Actually, also, Houston is getting a first-round draft pick. It is also heavily protected. So whether or not it materializes to an actual first-round pick, we're going to have to wait and see. But I want to hear your thoughts and insight on why this happened and how this is going to affect both teams, in your opinion.
I think this is one of the few NBA trades that I look at where I think both teams are in a better position. I mean, realistically, they're probably comparable-ish in terms of on-court impact at this point.
They have a similar style play, or actually similar makeup.
Yeah.
They both rely on their speed, athleticism, suspect on the shooting as far as from distance. I mean, obviously, John Wall's a little bit bigger question coming off an Achilles injury. He hasn't played since 2018?
2018, yeah.
So, I mean, that's getting up there as far as the amount of time he's been off the court. So we have to wait and see. I heard his workouts have been amazing, quote unquote, and we'll have to wait and see here this time next week, actually, when exhibition games really start up. So I want to hear your thoughts as far as if this is something that let's take a look at it from the Rockets' point of view. They're getting him and a first-round draft pick. Obviously, it's something where it just hasn't worked now with Chris Paul, with him and James Harden. It hasn't worked with Russell Westbrook, apparently, and James Harden. Where do you think it's going to work with John Wall? Or do you think John Wall and James Harden is going to work? Because I have my doubts. James Harden will be staying long enough to make it work.
Yeah, I think that's the most likely scenario, unless they try this out to the All-Star break and it overachieves. Maybe you keep it together for the year and then see where you're at. But I think you're probably right. Although if I'm going to be an optimist, I would say that Wall might actually be. I think he's a lesser player than Westbrook at this point, but he's probably a better fit next to Harden just because he's a sort of better spot up shooter. He's not a great shooter, but he shoots in the low to mid 30s, whereas Westbrook is the mid to high 20s. So maybe with a little lower usage and a little bit better ability to spot up, he makes Harden's life a little bit better. But I think this is one of those things where Russ wasn't going to report to camp. He wasn't happy with the coaching addition. He wasn't happy with the change in GM. Maybe he soured a little bit on playing with Harden anyway. So if you had to do something, this is probably a lateral move for them on the court, and you recoup a first-round pick, that you gave up to get Westbrook in the first place.
Do you still think they can sneak in as a top 10 NBA team into that playoff scenario? Do you still think that maybe even they're a top 8 seed at this point in time? Because with James Harden, you never know. James Harden's going to give you these 30-plus points and maybe carry a team on his back to competency, but I know a lot of people are having their doubts at this point in time.
I think there's just a lot of ifs to that. If Wall looks 75, 80% of what he was and the shooting is as improved as everybody claims it is, that helps. Can Christian Wood, their free agent pickup, take a step forward? Is DeMarcus Cousins reasonably healthy enough to contribute in some meaningful way?
Yeah.
Can Eric Gordon recover the form he had a couple years ago? PJ Tucker, also somehow a cyborg, I think, and never seems to break down. So can he stay healthy for another full season?
And he's older than LeBron.
Ifs. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact that he's taken the pounding he has as an undersized 4/5, for most of his run is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So a lot of ifs. I think they could, though, if everything broke right, be a playoff team, but that's probably as high as I'd be willing to go.
Yeah, and it's a team that right now in its makeup probably would not last very long. Even if they make it through the play-in games and get into a first round, I see them as being or having a very tough time against one of the top-seeded teams that they would go off against, whether it's the Lakers, the Clippers, what have you. So I am very interested to see how that plays out on their end. And, of course, like you said, it might be leading to James Harden eventually, getting moved on. They're committed to going ahead, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, by saying he's not going to be traded before the season starts. But like you said earlier, if the team is not faring as well as I think ownership would like, I see a trade coming or some type of package deal for James Harden to a team that can best supply them. I know everybody's been banding about Philadelphia. I'm not sure if Philadelphia wants to give up Ben Simmons, especially because who's behind Philadelphia at this point in time, Daryl Morey. I'm not sure if he would want to do business in that sense with Houston, especially since he's very familiar with the organization. I know Brooklyn is where James Harden wants to go. I was thinking the other day about it. What about New Orleans? They've got a lot of assets. You never know.
Yeah, and I think Zion is somebody that doesn't need the ball or a lot of shots to be impactful. So in terms of putting him with an up and coming star, that makes a lot of sense. The Harden Ingram fit is a little more questionable. So does Ingram go
He would go in the
back
trade
in that trade, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So that's one of the assets you give up. So, I don't know if that moves the needle a ton for New Orleans, to be honest with you, because you're not hitting Zion's prime for a few years, and Harden's probably toward the tail, or closer to the tail end of his prime. So does that make enough sense for them to do it? But they're certainly on a short list of teams that has the assets to do it. Same with like Denver, maybe. Orlando is somebody potentially who could maybe string together a package, but there aren't like a ton of places that theoretically could, make the Godfather offer there.
They were obviously very hesitant in Denver to go ahead and unload Michael Porter Jr. in the trade. He has to be the key to whatever major trade that they do. And if they are feeling that they need a huge upgrade for Murray and Jokic, then I think it's going to be something where they will need to go ahead and give up MPJ, especially if he continues on the defensive end. I'm not worried about his offense. Obviously, you and I both seen the tremendous stroke this man has from three-pointer at the three-point area, and I'm sure he's still faking out Kyle Kuzma every chance he can get. But I wanted to go ahead and say that MPJ goes, I think to me he is the most intriguing prospect out there just on the defensive end. If he can show any kind of competency on that end of the floor, who knows? He could become a major valuable asset for Denver, staying there or being traded for a superstar like James Harden.
Just given the style of player he is, it was probably never going to be a situation where he was going to put all of his effort into the defensive end anyway. But with all the back stuff and the leg issues, he had a foot drop. Like, have you ever seen anybody with a foot drop? Like, that's a pretty nasty thing to have to put up with. I just don't know that physically he'll ever be in a position to be a real perimeter stopper or anything like that. But like you said, competency would be nice. Can he learn the game well enough, study enough film, understand scouting reports enough to just be solid enough on the wing? Because the offense is obviously there.
I mean, the best case scenario for someone with his body type and build would be Kevin Durant. For me, because Kevin Durant was somebody at the beginning when he was really frail, was a sieve defensively at the beginning of his career, and basically his body caught up to him a little bit, and he became a much more competent defender, especially in his time at Golden State, where he was actually a plus defender, quite a plus defender, because he had a mindset at that point in time. I don't know whether he will hit Brooklyn after an Achilles injury. We'll have to wait and see. That team is got some nice talent, but on the defensive end, I don't know. We'll wait and see.
This is Raphael from NBA Draft Junkies.com, and you are listening to the Lakers Fast Break.
Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
People are just losing their minds trying to consume Marvel products right now, and I don't blame them. This is some of the best entertainment you can get on TV and big screen right now.
If something's going to be successful or not, they look at the mentions, they look at the likes, they look at the retweets and the tweets and the subtweets and the tweets, and they look at all of that to say, okay, this is actually going to garner a lot of attention.
Is it going to be enough, though? I think the fish out of water syndrome might be enough for somebody like us, because it's going to be hilarious to watch two stoner kids we saw barely make it through high school now live in a society that they fully don't understand because they've been stuck in a decade and never came out of it.
Facebook stars, not ninja stars, okay? I know how some people take things literally, so don't throw ninja stars at us, but like the Facebook stars. Click on those. That's what we want.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse.
Catch our shows on Worldwide Radio 7 days a week and wherever you get your podcasts. But for your team, when it comes to the Washington Wizards, what you get back is Russell Westbrook. And Russell, you never know whether he's happy, because that guy's always angry looking, because he's always mad. He's always motivated. He's always 100 miles an hour a minute. I want to hear your thoughts on the Wizards getting him, the actual reaction from the fans. Is this something that's going to be a positive? Because I think it clearly puts them now at the back end of the playoff chase in regards to an Atlanta, Orlando, maybe in Indiana. I don't know how you regard Indiana as far as being up on the other echelon, or do you put them in the mix here? I want to hear your thoughts on where do you think it now leads into this NBA playoff chase for the Washington Wizards, because I think it puts them in the middle of the mix.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think probably like a 6 seed is about where they're probably aiming at this point.
Yeah.
The other teams in the East got better. Philly, I think, is going to be more competent just because they've put more solid complementary pieces around Embiid and Simmons. You hope that those guys, if you're Philly, you hope that they stay healthy. Brooklyn's obviously better. Like you said, Indiana, I think, is one of the teams that you could maybe count on to take a step back. I actually think Toronto lost some pieces. So, Lowry's another year older. Maybe they drop back a spot or two, but it puts the Wizards in the mix. To be honest, I don't know that it raises the ceiling a ton. I think it's sort of a guaranteed floor raiser, because you don't really know what you were going to get with Wall, having not seen him. And I just trust that Westbrook is more likely to stay on the floor over the next 3 years than Wall at this point. So you just kind of banking on maximizing the next 2 guaranteed years that you have with Bradley Beal, with somebody that, while flawed, at least is probably going to go out and play hard. And there were some rumblings that, maybe Beal didn't love the rehab work and the shape that Wall was actually going to be in, or had questioned the work ethic a little bit there. And you can question a lot about Westbrook's game, but I don't think you can ever question the work ethic. So maybe that's a better fit from a mindset, temperament kind of deal.
Was the controversial video that was released in September that had John Wall on flashing gang signs, and I know it didn't go over well in the Washington, D.C. area, but I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that might have played a factor into it? Because, again, Washington gave up a possible first-round pick, which I think is something in here that they were reluctant to do. I know they wanted to just say, we wouldn't mind trading John Wall and his big contract, because we're talking with both these guys, $40 million a year plus contracts. I think both for the next 3 years as well.
3, yeah. Correct.
So do you think that might have had a factor as well? Do you think the ownership might have gone in, or the generalship, the governorship might have gone to, Tommy Shepard, who's the GM, who I think is a very good GM, and say, you know what, we think it's time for him to go?
I don't think it helped his case any. I mean, this is something that had happened over the course of the last decade. As a rookie, it happened. The NBA had to say something to him about it, about doing it on TV, during a game. Like, it's been an issue. And if you're a part of a franchise where they had to change their name because the previous owner, it meant so much to him to not reflect gang violence, and he had a lot of influence on the community about trying to make the area, at least around where the Wizards play, a safer area. It's just not the connotation you want. And to be very frank, our owner, or Governor Ted Leonsis, a lot of the moves have been been centered around just upping viewership and ticket sales and all those things. They're one of the organizations that's most heavily invested in sports gambling. There's a big casino attachment or sports book attachment to the arena now. So if you just want, whenevitably we get people back in the arenas, if you just want to guarantee that people come watch your team, you added Rui Hachimura and basically all of Japan as part of your fan base last year. You've added Deni Avdija, who brings an Israeli component and a Serbian component with him. Now Westbrook brings a built-in fan base. I think that's motivating in some, from some aspect of it too, is just have eyes on the team and try to make profit and, around the team through betting and things like that.
Deni Avdija is somebody I wanted to talk to you about. That's this year's first-round draft choice. I think it was number 9, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And I want to ask you this as something that an individual that Raphael and also Stone Hansen and also Michael Weisenberg, we all covered it on our many shows that I did covering the NBA draft. And I wanted to ask you, his best attribute is playmaking, having the ball in his hands, being that type of forward that can go ahead and set up the offense. With Russell Westbrook there needing and commanding the ball quite a bit, and obviously not exactly thrilled that he didn't have that option a lot in Houston with James Harden, who also needs the ball. What is this going to do for his development early on? Because I think it's going to hinder it just a little, because he is not the best shooter. I think that's his biggest detriment. I think that's why he fell down so far in the draft.
I was one of the leagues in that he was a part of in the Israeli league, was one of the few leagues that actually picked back up after COVID in late spring. And he looked markedly improved from the perimeter. I think you hope that translates. Everybody said in the first couple of days of workouts, they've been really impressed with his ability to shoot the ball. So with defenses not keying on him as much, with more time, hopefully they create some open looks for him. I think the team's fairly confident that he can be a reasonable spot-up shooter for them. And I think it's one of those things where you can never have too many guys that can put the ball on the floor or create open looks for others. So just because that's his best asset doesn't mean that, it's the only thing that he can do. And I think one of those things is they're going to really have to stagger the minutes between Beal and Westbrook anyway. So maybe Avdia is a secondary playmaker next to Beal, and that helps from a complementary standpoint. But I'm with you overall. I think there are some clunky fits. Rui Hachimura is somebody that doesn't necessarily stretch the floor particularly well. One of the wings, Troy Brown Jr., is really more of a sort of a point guard style player at 6'6", though. Isak Bongo, who'd probably be the starting small forward, was like a low 30s shooter. So, it's going to be a work in progress to kind of iron out the fit, I think.
One shooter, though, that you did get back at a very high ticket price, because as I remarked on another show, I think if you and I could go out there and shoot, we would be worth a nice, cool 30 or 40 million. And that is Davis Bertans, who got 5 years, $80 million for a player that is not going to help you defensively. But, man, shooting almost 45% from the three-point area, and that's on a high volume, too. He gives you that. So a lot of the, I guess, weight will be on him and Bradley Beal to produce at a high level from the outside. But was his contract, or do you think his contract is going to be a value contract going forward? Because I know a lot of people that I've heard from say that on the back end of the deal, that could really be something that could be very, deficient for the team going forward. The front part is, I guess, going to be dealt with and okay as long as he continues to shoot like he has, but the back end might be some trouble.
I think it's one of those things where $16 million for a shooter compared to what all the other similar caliber players got. Joe Harris and Danilo Gallinari both got in the 20s. So if you could say his deal averages out to like 16-ish, that's probably a value. He's actually okay defensively. I think the metrics weren't kind last year because just we had so many negative defenders on the court at the same time. But when he can be just a solid guy in a scheme and kind of hold off his guy, he's actually okay. So if you make some upgrades around him, I think somebody that he gets the scouting report, he's sort of well coached. Anybody I think that's played for the Spurs at any point in time at least understands how to play in a defensive scheme. So shooting usually ages pretty well. He's a 6'9" shooter. He can literally shoot from anywhere inside half court. I've actually seen him knock down about like 30, 40 footers in a row. I mean, the range is unreal. So I think that's worth the risk that you hope he ages well. The thing that was a little off-putting to me initially is the team's gone all in and said that the starting power forward for the team would be second-year player Rui Hachimura. So they were historically bad when they were on the court together last year. Hachimura was bad defensively. If you can't play them together and you're saying that Hachimura is a big part of your future, you've just committed to Bertans for 5 years. That is a little interesting to me. I think the thinking there is that you have Bertans for 2 years, you give Hachimura the opportunity to develop, and then hopefully Bertans is held up well enough, and if the caps continued to go up over the next couple years, he's cost controlled at $16 million. Somebody would take a flyer on him because the years will be shorter at that point. So I think they're hoping that they could kind of flip that for an asset longer term. Whereas if you let him leave, you're pretty much just giving up a potential asset.
And shooting is such a desired commodity right now, and it's something that there's not a whole lot of, or not enough of right now in the league. So I can see why, that they committed to what was necessary in order to retain him. And you're right, you mentioned Joe Harris and just having that ability to go ahead and shoot at a high level in the 40. If you're a 40% shooter in the league from the three-point area, you got some money coming your way.
Yeah, you got a job for as long as you want it.
Exactly, indeed. Well, again, I'm speaking to Matt Modderno. You got to go ahead and check out his show, Bleav in Wizards, Bleav. along with his fellow host, former NBA player Larry Hughes. You got to go ahead and check out their awesome podcast each and every time out when it hits wherever you get your podcasts. Before we head to your thoughts generally on the Eastern Conference, and before we head on out, wanted to go ahead and hear your thoughts on the baby Lakers, as you joked the last time, and now I've caught that in my mind, but the baby Lakers going forward. Isaac Bonga is Isaac Bonga. I'm still, very surprised he's still in the league. I'm going to be honest with you, and still playing at a level where he's starting, whether he's actually getting minutes on the NBA floor, because I don't see the next Magic Johnson, as Magic Johnson said once about drafting him. I see Thomas Bryant, though, if he can just pick it up on the defensive end, becoming a very good piece in this mix and very solid for them. And Mo Wagner, if he can stay healthy, can also shoot it from the outside. So I want to hear your thoughts, for the Lakers fans are familiar with, about what's going on with the baby Lakers and their future going forward for the team in Washington.
I'm actually like the president of Thomas Bryant's fan club. He takes a lot of heat here in DC because he's not, air quotes, an elite rim protector, but there's other ways to protect the rim. Like if you contain guys on the perimeter, you're still protecting the rim, and the Wizards did none of that last year. So I think he'll look better with some help and some competent, supporting cast. And he looked markedly better in the bubble. He's struggled with a lot of injuries, which is unfortunate. But if he can play that hard offensively, beat his man down the court every time, I got to think he can put in similar effort, rebounding the ball and things like that. A rebounding guard like Westbrook actually probably helps him. So I'm expecting a pretty big year out of him. Bonga is one that a lot of folks here actually really like. I'm not as sold on, but he's one of the few options we have that actually has the length and reasonable athletic ability to put up an effort on, put up some resistance on defense. Like you said, I don't buy the baby magic.
He's always been a Fran Fraschilla. I think I said it to you before. Yeah. He's a Fran Fraschilla for me, 2 years away from being 2 years away. And he's 2 years away still.
He's still really young. That's the hope, is that he's at least just somebody that can be a body and eat up some fouls and make life tough for. There's no one else on the Wizards, honestly. They didn't add any wing help other than Avdia, but who else are they going to throw at the Tatums or Durants or anybody in the Eastern Conference? That's a head scratcher to me, that they must feel pretty good about his ability to make a defensive impact, that they didn't really add a veteran at that position. I've been calling him broke man's Ben Simmons because, he is long enough. He does put the ball on the floor a little bit, but he's just he's not scaring anybody from the perimeter. So I don't hold out a lot of hope. Wagner started off the year great. I think people had a lot of hope for what he was going to be. It was cute that he was leading the league in charges for a long time. And then something happened. He got hurt for a little bit. And when he came back, he looked scared to shoot it. He was trying to be an old school post-up player. On defense, he was diving in front of people, trying to hunt charges. So he gave up. His foul rate is ridiculously high. So people are kind of down on his ability to last as, and be a meaningful long-term NBA player. He's part of the reason we threw $7 million at Robin Lopez, who just straight up wasn't good last year. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of faith in his ability to be a long-term impact player. But if you'd asked me, in February, I think everybody was all, gung-ho about what he could do for the team.
I think if the expectations don't remain high for him, I think he can go ahead and be a nice piece for you, as far as just someone who can go ahead and fill out the roster and provide you some decent outside shooting. If as far as, like you said, when he posts up, give me a break on that, because I've seen his post-ups in LA and they weren't anything to speak of. When it comes to Thomas Bryant, though, that's the thing. You said you're the biggest fan of his. Well, look where he came from. He was a second-round draft pick. He was waived by the Lakers when they had to go ahead and cut salaries, because they had to go ahead at that time and sign LeBron with whatever salary cap space, and they couldn't trade him. And so you guys basically got him off the quote-unquote scrap heap. I don't know what there is expectations or has. I mean, if you got a starter, and someone who can play meaningful minutes and give you meaningful production out of that, I think that should be a win for the Washington Wizards.
I agree, and I think the Westbrook thing that fits even better because he does shoot the ball well from the perimeter and spread the floor. He's probably out in the top half of the league in terms of shooting starting centers, and like you said, you're getting him on a pretty good deal here because of those expectations. I think we're paying him about almost the same per year as what we're paying Robin Lopez, who averaged 5 points and 2 rebounds and 15 minutes a game last year. So it's a value contract. I think if he can be a reasonable, if he's your fifth best starter, I think you're in really good shape personally. But everybody here has this notion of we needed Tristan Thompson or we needed Andre Drummond or one of these double digit rebounding centers, and Brian just hasn't been that. But
you do
I
have
don't
a
know that those
double-digit
guys help you
rebounder
much
now
either.
in Westbrook.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think that offsets some of the concerns, and I like I said, I'm expecting a big year here, and people just sort of haven't been fair to the guy. The things that they complain about with Bryant, they don't complain about with Hachimura because he was a rookie, but they're like 6 months apart in age. I mean, maybe it's a little bit more than that, but it's not a year. So it's not like he's this 26-year-old guy that, he should be hitting his prime by now. Like, I think, like you said, the expectation is the word there. You got to manage expectations for what he's been able to produce already.
Rui Hachimura, that's going to be a tough fit for you guys. I mean, nice kid, but
Sure.
Again, and like you said, he has a great following, but like I said before, that's a tough fit because he doesn't do anything super great, super well. He's not the outside shooter that's going to space it out for you. He's not going to bang it up inside or get you the tremendous amount of rebounds. So it's kind of going to be the position where it's going to be hard to keep him on the floor. He doesn't play outstanding defense. So I see him as the one that might be traded before Bertans. I'm just throwing that out there, but I think Bertans is a probably more valuable asset you want to keep because he does one thing outstanding, which Rui Hachimura doesn't.
I wholeheartedly agree. If it were me in a vacuum, I would trade him now while his value is probably as high as it could get. I think this year it's going to be a tougher fit with Westbrook in the mix, and that could potentially hurt his value. But the hope is he's a really hard worker. He's a really smart, kid that wants to please everybody so that he can make some strides, works hard in the film room by all accounts. So if he gets smarter, he's a better defender. They said the 3-point shot's got a much better arc to it this year. It was really flat before. So, you try it out, you see how it looks. And if he has a hot start to the year, maybe you flip him for a veteran small forward. If not, if he's your seventh, eighth guy longer term, that's also not terrible. So they're just so committed to him, and everything they've said is, he's the next Kawhi Leonard and all these crazy things that he can never live up to. I don't see them making a move for him anytime in the near future, although I do agree with you that it might make the most sense, especially timeline wise.
I would just say that for me, it just looks like that's the case, and he's going to become lesser and lesser key for you guys. With his flaws will stand out more than what his assets will that he brings to the table, because he doesn't do anything that stands out. When you're talking about a 5 that you're going against, and that the other team is going against the Wizards per se, you're going to target him. You don't fear him. You don't say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and spend a total amount of focus on this player because Rui Hachimura doesn't bring anything right now at this point in time that really scares teams to any extent on either side of the ball.
There was one game in the bubble where he guarded Kawhi Leonard for a half dozen possessions, and Kawhi went 3 for 12 that game. And we're going to totally ignore that Kawhi was yawning on the court while dragging a leg and seemed totally disinterested. But it's look at this one clip of him putting a hand up as Kawhi Leonard bricked a jump shot. He's made such strides already. And it's he's 6'8". He's not a monster athlete. He gets blocked at the rim a lot. He can't shoot from 3 yet. He puts the ball on the floor reasonably well for a forward, and he's a great mid-range shooter. If this was 10 years ago, I think he'd have a ton of value in a Carlos Boozer-y kind of way. It's just that player doesn't really exist anymore.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. Throwing that Boozer reference out there still gives me shivers when I remember Boozer on the Lakers, but we won't go there. We won't go there. But I wanted to go ahead before we head on out and before you tell everybody why they need to believe in the Bleav in Wizards podcast. I want to go ahead and hit you up on your thoughts on the Eastern Conference as we get closer and closer to the start of the season. Some general thoughts on the league, maybe a scenario where who do you think might be the upper echelon, because it seems like there's a good 6 or 7 teams that you can pretty much count on that have a variable chance, a very good chance to go ahead and take the league. I don't think there's a definitive like Milwaukee the past couple of years. I think even Milwaukee is showing some signs of there's some cracks in there, and I think there's about 5 to 6 teams that could actually be on top of the Eastern Conference.
I would still give the edge to Milwaukee. I think overall, though, everything that it's a lot closer together now, and a couple moves could go right for some other teams, and where you have a big injury or two for Milwaukee, and that could really kind of even the playing field. But I think the big win here is the Western Conference. Like for the Lakers specifically, I think the East getting better is to your benefit. Like you can have a few nights off for LeBron and AD and ease them into the season a little bit. And, I think the East did get better. It's not going to be as lopsided. I thought the top maybe 5 teams in the East last year were on par with the top 8 teams in the West last year, but maybe that's a little closer to 8 than it's been the past couple years. So honestly, probably the past 2 decades at this rate. If everything works out and the fit is right in Brooklyn, that's a team I think that could be scary come playoff time. Doesn't seem like there's enough balls to go around for everybody there. Spencer Dinwiddie is a lesser player than Kyrie, but he needs the ball a lot. Karis LeVert was great in the bubble. Like he single-handedly won them a couple games. He needs the ball a lot. They seem committed to DeAndre Jordan, who hasn't been good in like 3 or 4 years. So at some point, Jared Allen's got to take that personally, I would think. So, they put a lot of money in Joe Harris. So they're still good, but there's some fit stuff there. I would expect them to consolidate. So whether it's Harden or somebody, I can't imagine that there isn't some move in their future. And if you can turn some pretty good players like that into one more elite guy and still have a couple good pieces off the bench, they're the team that I would kind of, expect to be maybe not the dark horse, but they're the team I would want to least play in a meaningful playoff series at this point. Drew Holiday makes Milwaukee better. I think Philly took a step forward as sort of addition by subtraction from some of the fit stuff. They're still weird. I got to imagine Daryl keeps making some moves.
He can't help himself. He's addicted to
exactly.
trades.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean that he's probably like chomping at the bit to get something done here, even if it's on the margins. I'm still not sold on Miami. Be honest with you, as strong a playoff run as they made, you would think it'd be that's the team to beat, but I just don't see it that way. I think they were a team that was well equipped to deal with the bubble weirdness, and their young players could take a leap, and I could be totally wrong there, but I see them sort of in that next tier down with Toronto at this point, and maybe Indiana if all those pieces work. But you hear Oladipo wants out, and Miles Turner might also want out, and now Oladipo is saying he never actually said that. I'm not sure I buy that totally came out of nowhere. Brogdon's had some shaky health history.
Yeah.
Sabonis got hurt last year. That's a team that I don't have a lot of faith in making like an impactful playoff push, but they're also not somebody I'd want to play in the first round either. And Atlanta got better. I don't know that I still don't know that I'm scared of a team like Atlanta, just because I don't know if they're going to guard anybody well enough. But
they got a lot of pieces. They got a lot of pieces, I think is what I'd like to say about them.
For sure. Yeah. And could they consolidate some of those guys over the course of the year into another couple names too? Maybe that's the case. And I think there's a lot of teams that are sort of that next tier down of they're maybe one move away from putting themselves in the conversation. So it's deeper. I don't know if it's particularly top heavier, but I think the East is pretty good overall.
We're signaling the ref for a quick timeout, but we'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Hey, Lakers fans. Looking for the best place to go for up-to-date news, information, original videos, articles, podcasts, opinion pieces, and discussions about the world champion Los Angeles Lakers? Well, look no further than Lakerholics.com. With a legion of followers always there talking about everything Lakers and the NBA, there's no better place to go to share your fandom as the team heads toward another championship run. So stop by and be part of the conversation today at Lakerholics.com. If there was a surprise team you could see in the East, I'm not necessarily saying coming out of the East per se, but if there's a team that you think is going to surprise this year, who might that be?
I don't know if this necessarily counts as a surprise, considering they made it as deep as they did in last year's playoffs, but people are talking about how much worse Boston got by giving up Gordon Hayward. And, Hayward was important to them as a secondary ball handler and a creator, but they're pretty darn good when Marcus Smart is in the lineup. I actually think Tristan Thompson helps them. And, Daniel Tice was pretty good last year, but the Tice, Robert Williams, Grant Williams trio, they got abused a little bit overall by Adebayo. So Thompson gives you a little playoff pedigree, championship pedigree. He's a body that can bang around. He's a solid team defender. So I actually think, they at least are a wash in terms of like roster talent, and I would expect Brown and Tatum to take another step forward. So my co-host Larry Hughes is actually Jason Tatum's godfather, so we're very pro Tatum on our podcast. But
great player.
I think that guy's got another gear in him at some point. So that's the team I would maybe watch out for. But in terms of like surprises, maybe I would have said Orlando if Jonathan Isaac was going to play this year. I think he's a guy that eventually takes a leap. But I think it's pretty safe to say like these are the 7-ish teams, and who battles it out for like the 8th seed. Could that be Washington that surprises some folks if they make some deals and move some things around? Maybe so.
I think when it concerns Tatum, it's someone that I think of all the draft picks of recent years, because the Lakers have done a very good job of drafting over the recent past. I think that's the one, because they passed him over for Ball. I think that was something. Yeah, we did eventually get AD for Ball, but I don't think I would have been able to go ahead and tell you with a straight face that it was the right move to do, because they would have been able to keep Tatum, maybe trade Kuzma in the deal for AD and still have that option. But I think that was the mistake, obviously, that's going to stick out long term for Lakers fans, is passing over Tatum for Ball, because we bought into the hype and all that. So I guess we'll have to deal with it from there. All three Balls are I think at this point in time somewhat in the league. We'll see about LiAngelo, but I wanted to hear your thoughts finally on the Lakers themselves. We started this conversation with the extensions for LeBron and AD, but I know you're hearing out there where you're at as far as you're hearing Lakers, 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 Lakers. And I know a lot of these pundits and analysts are now talking about the Lakers in the same exact way that they were talking about the Clippers last year. And we all know how that story went. And that makes me very nervous about it. I am thinking, yes, I do think the Lakers have the best team in the NBA. I don't think that the gap between them and the other teams is as big as a chasm as I think some other people think they are. They're already handing the Larry O'Brien trophy. I still think there's still more tweaks that need to be done from the Lakers standpoint. I'm not as high on the Harrell signing as I think some others are. I am glad that they now have a bench that at this point in time can give you the kind of support that they didn't have this time last year. But I think there's still some things in place on the defensive end, because the defense was such an important key to us winning a championship. I want to hear your thoughts on the Lakers from an outsider's perspective, and actually just let me know what your feelings and thoughts are on the Lakers this season, or at least heading into the season.
I had heard you say on a previous podcast your stance on Harrell, and I actually really agree with you. I don't think in a vacuum that's like the best fit. I think they looked at it and said, when push came to shove, Howard and McGee couldn't really help you in a meaningful situation, where Harrell at least gives you maybe some secondary scoring, and he's a competent body. He's going to play hard. maybe you can
I also
almost
think
play
it's
him.
a regular season to postseason.
Agreed.
I thought Ibaka would have been a better postseason fit, and I
Agreed.
think for the regular season to get you points on game 55 of 70 out there, to get you like 20, I think Harrell's the best person for that. I'm just not convinced when it comes down to crunch time where Harrell's fit will take place.
I totally with you there. I think he's maybe a bit of an insurance policy too. Like, hey, we could get this guy. Honestly, I think the contract is a value contract for the production you get for him. So it's one of those things where maybe the fit's not perfect, but hey, it's worth it. And if it doesn't work, we flip him for the right guy at the deadline. And he got us through the first half of the year. You saw what the Warriors did with D'Angelo Russell. Like, hey, let's protect the asset, and then maybe we flip it for somebody that makes some more sense for us. So that's kind of how I saw that. The Marc Gasol signing is weird to me. Like, I would, if I'm a Lakers fan, I would have rather seen like an Aaron Baines for the same amount of money. Granted, he's getting a little older too, but still a little more impactful than what I think of from Gasol. He was almost unplayable in the bubble. Maybe you write that off as, hey, the bubble did weird things to a lot of guys. So, but he's a solid defender. I trust him more than I trust Dwight Howard. Just not a big Dwight Howard guy personally, but he's solid. He can move the ball around a lot. He's a veteran guy, good locker room guy. Other than the 1 year in Cleveland, you don't really hear a lot about like just a lot of major chemistry issues on LeBron James led teams. So I think Gasol kind of fits in with what they're trying to do. I love the Wes Matthews deal. Like, he's just going to be like a solid, competent adult at all times. And that's a guy, if you can get him on a minimum like that's a great pickup.
You want to start him? Go ahead. You want to have him coming off the bench? Go ahead. You want him spawning out for threes? Go ahead. You want to put him on a Kawhi or somebody just to at least, not contain any superstar wing out there, but you want to go ahead and hold him off, maybe to slow him down. He can do that too, even at his age and even after an Achilles injury. So he proved it for Milwaukee that he's able to go ahead and slow some of these big wings down just a little bit. I'm not asking for that type of deal where, you're going to go ahead and become a stopper or anything like that. And he can also hit from the outside, I think, a little bit more effectively at this point in time than Danny Green, because I know a lot of people were remarking about how painful it was to watch Danny Green and his gait and his movement at this age. But I think he's going to give you a little bit more than Danny Green can at this point in time.
Yeah, Green seemed to fall off a cliff, which was surprising to me because I've always been sort of a fan of what he brings. And, I don't watch the Lakers to the level you do, but I watch enough games to get a good feel for the team, I think. I've personally just never seen KCP play well. I feel like every time I watch, he's, shoots low 30s for the game and is sort of bullied around by bigger wings. So I just still don't trust him a ton in like super crunch time. And I think Matthews is, at least like you said, he's going to put up more resistance and not do anything dumb. I think the big question for LA is what they do with Kyle Kuzma longer term. I don't know that I see him being on the roster by the end of the year. I could see him being flipped for another wing or a guard, some other help somewhere, because he seems a little redundant to me in terms of what they have across the board. If I remember correctly, you're not like a super big Kuzma guy, right?
I was in the first year. I really got on the Kuzma train in the first year as a rookie. I actually saw his first game live here in Las Vegas, and I was really high on him. I thought he was a great kid. I thought he had a lot of promise. Then his shot decided to go ahead and walk out of town. And once his shot walked out of town, you saw a lot of the glaring weaknesses that he had. Yeah. Now, he did last year really, really by leaps and bounds move his defensive attitude and his effort and his efficiency to a level that I never thought he could get, where he's now a competent defender. He still gets beat on fakes and when he's playing against the elite players, he's still going to get, owned more times than not. But I've seen him being put up against Westbrook. I've seen him being put up against guards, forwards, and even taller players. Remember, he was our starting center at one point in time, which is kind of, funny in and of itself. But he has improved tremendously on the defensive end, so I will give him credit there. But yes, still the inconsistent shooting. He is an awkward fit on that Lakers starting lineup, and I think going forward, that's going to be an issue for the team. So they have to decide, do we really want to commit to someone who is going to still be an awkward fit for 3 years when you've got LeBron and AD, or are you going to find a piece that's better for you? And as much as I enjoy Kuzma as a person, and also what I remember fondly as a player in this rookie year, unless he returns to that player, I don't see him lasting long on the Lakers team.
Yeah, I see it similar to the Hachimura thing on our end. Just kind of a 6'8", power forward-ish guy, like not a great lockdown shooter, not a great defender. So he has some value and some upside, I think, that you can still maybe flip him for someone. So like you said about Harrell, I could see him being kind of heavily featured early in the year to get that value up, and then maybe you flip him for a solid vet.
I think he can still score 19 to 20 points on a bad team. Let's say like a Detroit or something. And I think he can still, obviously, as a complementary piece, can be a complementary piece on a championship team. He's already proven that. But I just think with the Lakers, he's always going to be that awkward fit, because I think he needs the ball more times than he can actually get on the Lakers.
Between LeBron and Davis and Harrell and now Schroeder, do you really need another guy who's just going to kind of come in and try to give you 15-ish points a game? And the Knicks only have like 11 power forwards on their roster, so maybe that's a team that would be interested, and you could get somebody back. But
well, I think New York is doing a little bit smarter now these days. I think that they're now saying, you know what, throw your bad contracts our way, but just give us assets in return. I'm not saying they're doing it by leaps and bounds, but at least it's a step in the right direction for New York and those long-suffering fans.
Yeah, I totally agree. But yeah, I think the guy we just now got to at the end here, Schroeder, is the big needle mover, because Rondo was tough. Quinn Cook didn't give you anything. Alex Caruso is like a cute story, but he's still, I think, not the guy you'd prefer having playing, crunch time minutes as your point guard. So I think Schroeder will help a lot.
As a defensive off-guard deal, Caruso has been tremendous playing some of those slot minutes. I mean, obviously he proved it in the finals. He can be, I don't want to say a lockdown defender per se, but statistically,
he's good.
The statistics are very kind to his performance and attributes. And obviously we adore him here, and his effort. Wish he could shoot better. He had that one stretch the season prior where in that 30-game stretch he was shooting 40% from three-pointers. And you thought, oh, there's a breakthrough there. And then, it unfortunately did not come to pass. But, we love him here regardless. He gives you so much effort, and he plays so efficiently with LeBron. I mean, the statistics back that up as far as one of the best duos in the league. And that's just like, I know that came out of nowhere, and it's like people are just fascinated by it. But you're right. The pieces are there for a championship. I do think they are the favorite and should be the favorite, but I just don't think right now it's like the Grand Canyon-esque type leap. And I think the Clippers at first kind of took a step back, but I think they've now leveled off with some additions that they're now as representative as they were last year. But is there any other team that you think in the West that might be someone that could stick out to you as well before we head on out?
The guy you were going in on earlier, I think you nailed it with Michael Porter Jr. If he can be a starting, knockdown shooter from them and a competent, serviceable defender, and Gary Harris maybe regains a little bit of form, or they package some of those guys up and make a big trade. Denver's still really young. I think Jokic is going to get better. I think Jamal Murray looked amazing for most of the bubble. If that can be stretched over the course of a season, the nightmare matchup for people. So I haven't given up hope on them, because I just think even if they don't make a ton of moves, they're still young enough for internal development.
Defense, though. They gave up a lot of defense when they let some people go in free agency.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Grant was one of those guys that, like, if you get into the numbers a little bit, was maybe a little overrated in terms of what he brought to them defensively. The length was nice, and Paul Millsap is starting to really fall off a cliff in terms of what he can provide. But Torrey Craig's defense slowed down considerably. He couldn't shoot it. So I think if you have guys like Will Barton back that didn't play in the bubble that we kind of forget about, that they're going to be tough, and they've got the pieces to make a move. And I think that's the big thing. And I obviously really like what Portland did. I don't know that they're going to take a big enough step forward to really challenge anybody for a championship, but I would much less like to play Portland in a first round series next year than I did, would have this past year.
Absolutely. I think they made a lot of nice upgrades, and I just think if they can find some level of competency on the defensive end, watch out. They could be a top 4 team, in the Western Conference. So a lot of good things to speak of there. But before we head on out, even more great things when it comes to your podcast, the Bleav in Wizards podcast. So give me the sell job on the way out as far as the Bleav in Wizards podcast between you and Larry Hughes and what you do for Wizards fans and NBA fans in general.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the kind words there, too. We just try hard to give a different perspective that you can't really get in the Washington area specifically. Larry's one of the few former players that does media that isn't team affiliated. I mean, not that the guys that do stuff for the team aren't great, but there's only so much candor you can provide when the team is signing your check. So Larry has just an unbelievable way of just being like real and transparent and fair, but without ever having to be mean or critical of guys. So he's one of the few guys of the ex-pros that can kind of walk that line and give you real insight without having to be gimmicky. And, from our episode that came out yesterday about the Westbrook stuff, he did like a 5-minute thing just talking about how NBA scouting reports actually work. And if you're just like a nerdy basketball fan, I think it's the kind of thing that would be really interesting from an insight perspective, because I think everybody gets how that works on like a college team. You scout a particular team and things like that. But I had no personal idea how those things get worked out, what really shows up on a scouting report. So it's things like that. And then he was able to kind of say from a firsthand perspective what it's like to guard Russell Westbrook. Like, the media covering our team, there's no one else that can tell you, what it's like to actually have to try to shut that guy down. So a lot of stuff like that. And we just try to balance that out and just bring in as many good guests as we can. We've had, the Gilbert Arenases, Troy Brown Jr.'s. We try to mix up the perspectives, Muggsy Bogues, different people to just kind of provide different aspects from Wizards history.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to check out the episode that you dropped. I'm going to check that out today. I'm very intrigued to hear what he has to say about this little mano-a-mano deal that they did involving tens of millions of dollars still on the table for each. So that's still something that Wizards fans have to look at. But I think there's a little bit more hope in the DC area because of what a healthy or somewhat healthy 30-year-old plus guard. Yeah, exactly. You're keeping your fingers crossed the whole and knocking on every single bit of wood you can. But I think he is the healthier of the two, like you were saying. So I think there's a little bit better future for the team. He might be a little bit better fit between him and Bradley Beal. And anything you can do to keep Bradley Beal there is of paramount importance for you in Washington, I would assume.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is just keep Beal happy. And if this does that, and it seemed from like his press conference today that he seems pretty happy about the fit, I think that makes it a win for everybody. I will say that half the fan base here is it's a reasonable split of people that even if they like the deal, there's still that nostalgia factor. Like Wall was one of the longest tenured players on any team. So anytime you change something that's been a staple in your routine for a decade, there's going to be that sort of weird period of, I don't know how to feel about this, I think.
Well, we'll see if John Wall plays well down in Houston. There's going to be a lot of I told you so, I told you so's coming out of the woodwork for your show.
For sure.
Well, my friend, it's been great talking to you. Again, I'm going to have you on more often because it's been far too long since you've been on the show. I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today. It is Matt Modderno. Again, please check out his show, Bleav, B-L-E-A-V. That's part of the Bleav Network. Bleav in Wizards podcast with him along with Larry Hughes, NBA great guard that was in the league for many years. You want to go ahead and check out their insight each and every time out on the Bleav in Wizards podcast. Well, it's awesome again having you here, Matt. I cannot thank you enough for being part of the show, being part of the program right here at the Lakers Fast Break podcast.